Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Coffin Talk Interviews with the Living, a weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our life. This week, our guest is Akil Vicks. He's originally from Philadelphia, but he's currently living in Western Massachusetts. He's a smart guy. If you might want to grab a thesaurus before this interview. I don't need one because I'm an author and I know every word. I'm kidding, but the point is, he speaks so eloquently, and he's just like really, really smart. But the more important thing to me is his heart is as big as his mind, and he just helps explain the leftist perspective on this episode, which I think is something that needs explaining. I think that most of us in the Western world are brainwashed to hear the word leftist and think of horrible Russia, horrible China, horrible Cuba. You know, the list goes on and on. But what we never get into is, why do these ideologies keep coming up? What exactly could they serve and what would they not serve, and where does everything fit into the giant paradigm that we're in, which is increasing authoritarianism in most countries, increasing populism, the futility of effort and activism, and most of all, I think there's just also this general like confusion with digital technology and what the future is going to be as far as like work, labor, artificial intelligence. We don't get into specifically everything I just talked about, but we hit enough of the different talking points that I feel like this is a really good introductory course for people who want to think outside of the narrow box of like blue side, red side, yay. So if you're on either side, maybe you're not as much on either side as you think, and maybe you're actually on the side of solidarity, which is I think the essence of what Akil is trying to bring to the world. So I deeply respect this guy. I liked him a lot before I had him on the interview. Now I like him even more. He's just a really nice, good guy. And, you know, there's definitely some normal parts in this interview. We laugh, we talk. We, of course, do actually talk about life and death and what he thinks. But in general, I just want to recommend this as like, if you're someone who thinks that America is polarized and there's no hope and that we're never going to solve and find a middle ground, Akil is your guy. Akil comes from a side, but he explains that his goal is to have no sides and how we could probably broker peace. And I think he ends the interview by saying something about accept people where they are. And I think that's really important as you listen to this interview, is listen to how accepting he is and listen to how much he thinks about his ideas. And he is easy to reach. So if you actually listen to this and you feel like reaching out to him, you can 100% find him and he will answer you. So once again, my guest's name is Akil Vicks, and he is an incredibly, extraordinarily eloquent, amazing writer who talks as well as he writes. I just learned that in this interview. So with no further delays, we will kick it to the interview. Thank you. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Coffin Talk Interviews with the Living, a weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our life. This week, our guest is Akil Vicks. He's a freelance writer who's written for Jacobin magazine and In These Times. He also runs a successful Substack called On One, where he covers matters of identity and political economy from a leftist perspective. He's easy to find on all social media, especially Substack, Facebook, and Instagram, and I will have notes for how to find him and especially how to find his wonderful Substack, which you should subscribe to right now before you even listen to this interview. You can thank me later. With all that said, Akil, how's it going?
It's going good. It's cold up here in Western Massachusetts, but I'm persevering.
Western Mass. Wow, I used to live in Ithaca, and I would drive through Western Mass down to New York, and yeah, that's a cold place.
Yeah. Yes. I'm from Philly, and I thought I knew what cold was,
Yeah.
in a northeastern city, and then I moved here, and I was yeah, reality hit me
Yeah.
about what cold really means.
How long have you been up there? Like years?
About 6 years, about six, yeah, about right before my daughter was born, and
Okay.
she's 6, so yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, congrats on having a kid. That's cool. Yeah, it's life-changing, right? I mean,
Absolutely, for
yeah.
sure.
Actually, it's kind of a weird segue, but it does matter to me. After you had a kid, how did you feel about your relationship to like your own career and your own ego? Did that soften or change?
It made me want to uh like take it a little bit more seriously. Just to say that I have my own. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't completely subsumed into the child raising process. That I wasn't only going to be, dad, and I also had my own, like, I'm still a human, I'm still a person. So I wanted to, try to find that balance between chasing her around. Now she has a little brother, so now I have two of them to chase around.
Yeah.
But also, making time to make sure like I had something to activate my own species essence beyond the kids.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I'm asking because I have another young one too. So I have like a about to be 5 and then about to be 2. And
Hmm.
so what you're saying, yeah, it totally gels with me. And it's interesting because I did notice it like change some of my like ego identity, but it also did the same thing, which is like I want my kids to be proud of me. I want to like make sure I'm like,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, do you ever like actually imagine, because it just happened to me where my youngest niece is like 12, 13, and I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, she can find Substack and like find my stuff. Like it just like occurred to me after 12 years of bliss that like potential like, and I don't do anything I'm embarrassed about, but I definitely don't write towards 12, 13-year-olds. So do you ever think about your own children reading your stuff?
Not until the last like 5 seconds ago. So thank you for putting that thought in my head. Um, I don't know. I feel like when I was a kid, I like sought out more adult things. I didn't understand them at all. Looking back, I'm like, oh, I didn't know what I was talking about, but I wanted to, try to understand. And like I think, my parents did a good job of explaining what they could and giving me like, whatever resources. So, that comes up and they start reading my Substack. You know, I have to apologize for the cursing, but other than that, I think I can
Yeah.
have a conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, my daughter got in trouble for saying the F bomb at preschool the other day. 100% my fault. So I just
Yeah.
told her, I said, like, that's dad's word in the car. Come on. Like, you
Hmm.
gotta, like, so it's like
Hmm.
an
Hmm.
interesting tug of
Hmm.
war where I'm not ashamed that I swear. I'm more like worried about her having teachers yell at her, you know? So it's like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's about, I have the same, thing with my kids. I'm like, I want to teach you guys code switching. Like, I'm not really going to shame you if you drop an F bomb and then, I don't like censor a lot of the music we listen to in the house. So,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
going to pick up something, you know, so yeah, as long as I can teach them to like, look, in these areas, just try not to say those words.
Yeah, yeah. The 4 almost 5-year-old asked me what kill meant the other day, and because it was repeated in something, and I was like
Yeah.
some podcast I had on, like as I start the car, the podcast on my like phone starts playing on the car. Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and of course it's like, and then he killed her, and he killed her, and she was killed, and I'm like, oh god, like this is, Alana, my wife, when you listen to this, sorry, but and actually, I should circle back. We always ask our guests how old they are, where they grew up, which you said Philadelphia, and then what generation, if any, do you consider yourself a member of?
So I am 39. I just turned 39 December last year. Um, and yeah, I grew up in Philly. And I guess I would have to say I'm an elder millennial. Like when I was younger, I really desperately wanted to be Generation X because I thought that was cool. But
Yeah.
I think at this point, Elon has ruined the letter X for everybody. Um, so yeah, and I think from being honest with myself, I'm an elder millennial, which is like probably the least coolest name you can have for a generation, but it fits.
Yeah, I agree. Except at some point there will be an even less cool one because the whole naming generations thing is such a sham weird thing anyway.
Yeah.
And actually, you reminded me. I said you can be found on all social media. He cannot be found on X, nor can I. And props. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is kind of sad because it was actually by far the best platform for someone who writes about what you write about and wants to get like traction. So, um,
Yeah. I mean, I still, I keep an eye on the Nazis pretty much.
yeah, yeah.
I want to see what's going on, but yeah, there's no point in going on that hell site anymore.
Yeah, and we are going to jump into metaphysics, and we will keep the coffin talk theme going. But I, of course, want to
Mhm.
interview you about you and your career. And I love what you write about. And I'm not like anti-Nazi because that's just too sliver of a small subject to be anti at this point in
Yeah.
humanity and where we are. But I am curious, like, how do you feel is the relationship between your thoughts, how you convey them, and then to what efficacy, like effectiveness, do you see would they have, and like what are your aims with how you approach all that?
I guess if I had a mission statement, it's like I want to have a better conversation about a lot of these topics that come up. And I know like that's a lot of people say that. But I find that especially when it comes to leftist politics and topics that are associated with the left, not even necessarily like strictly leftist, but just things that are associated with leftist politics. There's just a lot of like muddying of the waters, a lot of you know, purposeful misunderstanding of what certain arguments are and aren't. And it's not just coming from the right. I think a lot of it comes from the liberal center as well, of just not really understanding what the leftist perspective or argument is. So what I guess what I'm trying to do is say, like, all right, I'm not trying to make you agree with me in anything. I'm not saying that you have to agree with my take. I just want you to be able to restate my take in an accurate way. So when you have your argument, when you have your counterexample or whatever you want to say against what I'm saying, at least we're actually talking to each other, and you're not just talking past me. You're talking to a straw man, or the blue-haired liberal woman caricature that everyone conjures up in their head. So that's my goal. I just want to like actually have a real conversation.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I have 17 questions from that one answer because, first of all, I'm glad I didn't try to fumble my way into saying that, because I would have taken 5 minutes to try to articulate that. But that is precisely what appeals to me about you, because I'm from Berkeley, so I'm used to all sides of the left being misrepresented horribly, but more often, in my opinion, growing up there, by the left, not by the right. Like, so the right is so like cartoonishly negative that it doesn't like do much damage. But meanwhile, like, like I went to Mills College in Oakland, California for graduate school, and like, these young like leftists, and I'm using air quotes for the listening audience, they're not really leftists. Like they're just like whatever they are. And then when you just said what was it, left center? No, what do you call it?
Like the liberal center.
Yeah, the liberal center.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's like the hardest thing to explain, because like I constantly hear people my age and who consider themselves liberal being like, gosh, I feel like I'm moderate now. I feel like I'm conservative. Like I'm being called this, and so like that's what I like about you, like many things about you, but is that you're trying to like get that conversation back to like a normal approach of like talking, because I think most Americans under 50 went to college and read about Marxism, but it like got very distorted. So instead of talking way too much, I want you to kind of explain, like, how would you explain Marxism and leftism and what differences, if any, you see?
So I think, if we're having like because there's so many different schools of thought and battles between leftists on certain things, but if you want to break it down to like the very basic thing, I think there's two planks, right? There's a sociological component where we want to say we want to maximize personal freedom, personal expression, right? You want to we're not trying to have a very strict, prescribed way of being, right? People say that, oh, Marxists hate the traditional family. And it's like, no, we don't hate the traditional family. Which is there are other families that work, and we don't want to like pigeonhole everyone into one kind of family because,
Yeah.
And then there's the thing that causes a lot of consternation, which is the economic argument. And then, you can go through however many different, heterodox economic schools of thought that you want. But generally, if you're talking about a Marxist perspective on economic thought, you're talking about democratizing the economy, right? You want to have as many people as possible being able to fully participate in the economy, to be able to actually make real choices. And the way you do that is by giving them ownership over their own production that they carry out with their own hands. And there's a million different ways to get around to doing that. And that's when all the fights happen. Is it stricter government regulation? Is it what they call handouts, or like what I like to call social investment, because that's what it really is. But social investment, is it a stereotypical, or what everyone imagines as a Marxist thing, where the state owns the means of production, right? But there's different ways to get there. But what you're trying to get towards is a economy that is just as democratic as we like to think that our government is, right?
Yeah.
You vote for your representatives, but you don't get to vote for your boss, right? You can have a right. You can have a referendum on taxes, but you don't get to get together with the rest of the people that you work with and say, okay, let's talk about this pay scale. Let's like get the information on how much money is coming in, how much money we can afford for R&D versus payroll versus buying, supply costs, and let's like come up with a pay structure that everyone is happy with. And, you don't get to do that in your job unless you work for a worker co-op or something like that, or you belong to a strong union. But the general gist is, let's get to a place where the economy is also democratic. Because when the economy is not democratic, you have a few people making decisions for millions and billions of other people that don't get any sort of input into what people at the top decide. So yeah, that's the basic, I think.
No, that was a great answer. That was very
Yeah.
concise and very good. And what I was taking notes on because I want to ask is I have questions about specific things you said, but then I also want to like have you help me identify what the heck my political philosophy is because I'm like all over the place. I agree with everything you said as far as the goals. What I constantly get slammed on by my friends is like, so I'm going to use their terminology. I'm not going to use mine, but they're like, well, what about lazy people? And I say, well, lazy people are fine. They just exist. So why don't you just give them money and make them go away? Like, I'd rather have a lazy person who's not mad at me than a lazy person who's mad at me. And so I think like it makes a lot more sense to just give UBI and let people go from there. First of all, how does that sound to you? Because you're much more educated than me. And second of all, like, do you think that would work?
Um, yes, I do think it would work. I think the idea that people are lazy is a very purposely created myth that's been kind of, it's kind of just been in the air, the background radiation of the myth of the lazy worker. A while back I wrote a book review for Jacobin about the basically about Black labor, the history of Black labor in America. And there's like all these like really amazing stories of these people who are like, they're coming out of Reconstruction, the failed Reconstruction process. They're a lot of them are former slaves. A lot of them are just now trying to like find footing in a world that's very antagonistic to their very being. And they're coming together and they're supporting each other and they're finding ways to use their labor to like carve out a better life. And at every step, you have a newspaper saying, "Oh, they're lazy. They just don't want to work."
Yeah.
There's a story about these laundry washerwomen before there was like industrial laundromats. You just had to like have Black women come to your house and wash your clothes for you. Um, and these women started, organizing. They had a list of abusive households that would have like,
Oh, that's
the woman
cool.
or the man of the house would be abusive. So like, we're not going to work with you, right? We're not going to work super long hours so we can't see our kids or do our own washing, right? And all of this was none of this was saying they don't want to work, but when this was written about in newspapers, it was from the perspective of, oh, they just don't want to work anymore. They just don't, they're so. And are there people in the world who would take a UBI and not do anything whatsoever? Maybe. But even I think what we thought when we talk about laziness in the context of our economy, I think the implied assumption that we're not actually saying is that when we talk about laziness, we're talking about providing productive value for somebody else, right? We're not talking about lazy in that they're not trying to do anything with their lives, right? Like, sometimes someone might just be a really good friend, right? And that's not making any economic activity, but they're just being really supportive of their friends. And that's valuable in a social
Yeah.
context, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I like to talk about a care work, right? Like how care work is so ridiculously undervalued, mostly because it's work that's associated with women. Um, but there was, I think, I forget who did this, who made up this stat, but someone crunched numbers and found that if you paid every woman in the world minimum wage, like American minimum wage, for just the work they perform in the house that does not get counted in any economic stat, it would be an industry that is worth more than the entire global tech market. And that's including
Wow.
all the money spent on AI. Yeah. Right. So like,
That's cool.
when we talk about laziness, are we talking about like someone who isn't contributing anything to society, or are we talking about a very specific narrow band of economic activity that usually is producing value for someone else to control, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, that was a great answer, and I think you're illustrating something I think about obsessively, which is propaganda costs money, and the rich people have a lot of
Mhm,
money, so it's like very easy for them to bulldoze like anything. I mean, like I lived in Oakland during Occupy, right?
mhm,
That was the most eye-opening experience of my young adult life. Was just watching the news media cover an event that I walked by every. I lived like blocks from it. I mean, it was horrible. There were helicopters
mhm,
flying every night. I couldn't sleep. There was more crime. It was like sketchy and stuff, but I supported the movement and I did not care. But I watched the media just like lie, just completely lie. And I watched the police lie in press conferences. And then meanwhile, the
mhm,
people who
mhm,
wanted to tell the truth, they were mocked, ridiculed, labeled, not given interviews, cut off. The interviews were spliced, and so
mhm, mhm.
I wholeheartedly endorse what you just said. And it did raise one of my favorite questions to ask anyone who actually thinks about these kind of things with intelligence, such as yourself. Are Americans more out of the following three choices? Which are we worse at? Are we more classist, racist, or sexist?
Ooh, yes. Um, no, I think if you're gonna pull my Marxist string out, on my back and start having me say Marxist stuff, I have to say classes, right? Because the idea is that the racism and the misogyny flow downward from class. These are expressions of class position, right? It's I just forget the guy's first name, but there's a British Jamaican political philosopher
Oh yeah.
who said, race is the modality through which class is expressed, right? Um, and you could say the same thing with gender, because these are positions, these are social positions, socially constructed positions, race and gender, that uh, as a part of the construction carry with it some sort of role and relation of production within it, right? So uh, uh, you black people or whatever other race or other minoritized races that's seen as expendable labor, right? That's the expendable labor of a functioning capitalist society. Women are seen as the unpaid care work of a functioning capitalist society. And because on its face, you can't just look at everyone who's darker than you and say, "Oh, well, those are the workers and all the women. They're just there to raise my kids." You can't just say that. You have to come up with all these myths and all these reasons why this state of affairs is natural and preordained, and you can't mess with it. But I think these things don't. I think you can't really separate the three, right? I think they
Mhm.
all kind of interplay with each other. They all like work within each other. That's why I get in trouble with my more liberal friends when I take a class first approach to analysis, and then I get in trouble with my leftist friends when I take a more race or gendered approach to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of what we're seeing with Trump 2.0 is a reaction to women specifically.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think a lot of what's happening now is a direct reaction to Me Too.
Hmm.
Uh, all the Peter Thiels, the Mark Andreessens, Elon Musk of the world, that rightward turn of these big billionaires, these investment bankers, guys that just like all of a sudden just seem to abandon, the woke mind virus of it all, right? All that happened post Me Too when people started finally saying, "Hey, you probably shouldn't just be like harassing your secretary. That's probably not that cool. You shouldn't do that." And they reacted terribly. And now they're all MAGA for life. But so yeah, I don't think you can really. I think a I think America is a liberal capitalist nation, and that creates a series of contradictions
Mm.
that we have to resolve through these myths that we tell ourselves about class and race and gender.
That's awesome. Be sure to write that out later and write a whole essay on that because that was yeah.
I'll work. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
No, you phrase things very eloquently and on the fly, and I mean, I can tell you're not like speaking rehearsed. If you're not watching this, this man is a thinker, and he's thinking on the spot. And I'm pressing you with like some pretty hard. I think they're hard questions, not on purpose to like get you, but I want to learn from you. I only have so much time. I do read what you write. I wish you were writing quicker for my taste, but like you write.
Me too. Me too,
Yeah.
man.
So no, it's cool because I'd never come into these with specific questions, but I have been like dying to meet you and talk to you because you're the first person I've found since like COVID, Me Too, like all that, who like is fighting the good fight without like getting entrenched and calling people names and being like I have to censor it if I say so but because it's unfair. Like there's so many types of people who are afraid of the word leftist, and not all of them are bad, and many of them could understand and be nurtured into like a productive conversation. And also, I don't think I agree with everything you say, nor do I think I should or have to, but I think that the principles of what you're saying are things that we're just not even talking about in this nation, and they are the real principles that we could work on and improve our country. And I don't want to give up on America. I feel more and more pressure to just shrug and say, all right, like it's over, the experiment. But I don't want to do that. The whole point is it's an experiment, and we're in real time in it. So let me get back to something else. So actually, yeah, let's segue that into, so what are your thoughts about nations and nationalism? Because this is another area where I get like completely dogged by everyone. I'm not a fan of nations. I don't like them. I think that it's a weird construct. I think, race and gender are social constructs. So is a nation. And I actually am writing right now on something about like as a child, how we had to pledge allegiance to the flag, and like how awkward it is as I start to realize like what that means and why it was done, and when it was written, and to which purpose it serves. So what do you think about nationalism moving forward? Because we are in a nation. It is called America. It does have structures and laws. Yeah. Hi, everybody. This is Mike Oppenheim, the host of Coffin Talk, the show you're currently listening to, and I'm interrupting to ask you if you would mind doing me a favor and subscribing to my online publication called You Are Here on Substack. It features weekly essays. I also have fiction, and of course, there are links to the podcast and all the bonus episodes. It's completely free, and I would love your support. So please head over to mikeyop.com, that's MIKEYOPP.com, and sign up today. Thank you. Bye.
I think it's a complicated topic. Something that I don't really have like a very concrete and easy answer to talk about it. I mean, obviously, the problems with nationalism, we're seeing them play on our news media every day now, right? And I think that's something that like liberalism has to specifically answer or deal with in the way they're not doing it right now, because on the topic of borders, right? And that's on everyone's mind right now with everything that's going on. Like we want to be able to think that like, okay, the way what Trump is doing right now is beyond the pale. It's Gestapo, it's authoritarian, it's awful. But there's a kinder, gentler way to do it, right? We just need to have more immigration judges. Oh, we just need to have better trained ICE agents, or But the problem is, once you establish a border that restricts the movement of human beings, you're gonna go down this road, right? This is predetermined. Once you establish that there are in-group people that belong to the nation and out-group people that do not belong to the nation, but are nevertheless present in the nation, you're gonna go down this road, no matter what your liberal intentions are. And I think like the thing that I don't know how many people have heard this name, but Carl Schmitt has been coming up a lot in conversations about like the intellectual backbone of the MAGA right. And if for people who aren't familiar with Carl Schmitt, he was a German legal theorist and jurist, also a Nazi, and his great claim to fame, what people most talk about him now for, is his idea on how to dismantle liberal democracy, and to collapse a very complicated subject to a very short, pithy explainer. His idea was that liberal nations are nations. They have a national consciousness, which means they have this in-group, out-group distinction built in to whatever they're trying to do, no matter how they're trying to frame it as liberal, democracy or whatever. This in-group, out-group distinction is built into the framework. All that the fascists had to do was to find that boundary, that border between in-group and out-group, and push inward, right?
Mm.
Start excluding more and more people, find reasons why more and more people belong on the other side of that boundary. And once you've got a critical mass of people who are outside the boundary of the friend enemy distinction, is what he talked about, people get scared, right? Because now they're thinking like, "Oh my God, I'm surrounded by enemies. I'm surrounded by people that want to kill me. What am I going to do?" These liberals are out here talking about, "Oh, we need better processes and institutions," but now these conservatives over here, they're talking about they're going to get the job done. They're going to go in the streets with guns and masks, and they're going to get rid of the problem. They're going to protect me, and they're going to keep me safe. And that's a compelling political message that you can't really deny. So I think, you know, if we're going to continue being a nation, if we're going to continue to be, a nation of borders and border laws, that's something I think we have to actually contend with. We can't just brush it aside. We can't just say that like, oh, well, Trump is an aberration, Steve Miller's an aberration. Once we get control of the government, we can have a better immigration policy. We'll make it easier for people to immigrate. We'll give amnesty and all these, because that distinction is still there.
Yeah.
And then it's still there for someone to push inward. On the flip side, you know, uh, as a leftist who, I'm not gonna say I'm a historian, but I read a lot. I try to like, learn the history of these things. I also understand that, there's a lot, nationalism plays a pretty prominent role in a lot of, leftist revolutions against, the capitalist, hegemony in the world, right? Especially in the global south and in Africa, like this sense of having a nation, having a people is what inspires people to reject, the hegemonic ways of organizing government and economy, and pursue a more people focused, a more democratic economic way of living. So like it's a double-edged sword, and I don't have like a neat, clear, concise answer to what we do about nationalism. I know that we need to have a more substantial and deeper conversation about it, other than just like, we just need to get the right people in charge of the border.
Yeah, yeah. No, great answer. And that's part of why I asked is like, I didn't have you on expecting you to like wave a magic wand and be like, this will cure everything. I really,
Right.
what I appreciate about you is you help people understand what the real argument is. And that's something, I've really noticed about you, and you're doing it in this interview. And it's really helpful because right now, no one's doing that. Everyone's doing the opposite. They're doing, as you said, like pithy explainers that aren't explainers. They're just like
Yeah.
direct straw man attacks or some other logical fallacy origined destructive tendency. And yeah, and I have a lot of other questions I want to ask. I do want to move into metaphysics a little bit, so I
Mhm.
feel a little rushed because I'd like to ask a couple more things about that. So I'll probably like table it and see if we have time at the end.
Sure.
But I do agree with what you said, and I think that there is, like, I'm in a family and I'm proud of our family, and we use a last name, and like at what end
Hmm.
would that just be the next division? So yeah, I see a lot of the intelligence behind what you just said, and I do think, as a child, like, I've had too many presidents to count. They've all gone to war. They've all passed pretty shady immigration policies. It's not like that's what I don't appreciate right now is this idea that like, oh, if only Team Blue had won, everything would be fine. Like, not really. Like the
No. Yeah.
morality train has been just descending in this country, and it's interesting because you brought up like we had abolition and then we had Reconstruction. Like we have like positive attempts to correct the ultimate wrong, which is our nation was based on halves of hegemonic and then have not slavery. Now the only other question I was dying to ask you is, are people even aware of the fact that like modern slavery is like essentially the prison system, and that the out group right now is just arresting people, putting them in jail, and then not paying them to make products? Because I keep reading about this and I don't understand why it's not like the topic of all topics.
I think it's because liberal society is kind of based on that proposition. Is kind of our comfort in a liberal democracy is based on the fact that a certain portion of the population of people who live in this country are rendered unpersons, right? They're not full people. And we get to take advantage of that. Either we get to take advantage of that as free labor, which is, the slavery component or prison labor, all that stuff, or in a more like roundabout way, we get to take advantage of them as surplus labor, right? That's Milton Friedman's Nehru calculation, the amount of unemployment necessary to keep inflation down, right? So as long as we have this reserve pool of highly precarious, highly fungible labor, we can keep labor costs down, which any capitalist will tell you is the biggest and most hardest cost to deal with when you're running a business to be profitable is labor costs. So as long as we have a large amount of people who are precarious who will take work for the minimum wage or below the minimum wage. And this is an argument that conservatives make about immigration all the time, right? All these immigrants are coming in, they're willing to work for less, they're taking your jobs. And what they don't talk about, what they don't say is that like it's going to happen regardless. It doesn't matter if it's an immigrant. The immigrant is just like the easiest way to go about it. They're going to figure out a way to make your wages low. Like that's what they're there to do as a CEO. So uh, homelessness, right, is a good way, is a good tactile way to view this because people say like every homeless person is a policy failure, right? And that's true, but it's also what we kind of ask for as Americans because the only route that most of us have towards actual wealth, right? Wealth and capital that will make you money in the long term just by owning it is housing, right? It's your house. The house is the only thing most of us will ever own that will appreciate in value and will be able to sell at some point for some type of profit. And for that to work, housing prices have to go up, right? Housing has to be a commodity with exponential growth for all of us to be able to, buy a house and sell it for more than we paid for it down the line, which means eventually people are going to be priced out of housing, which means people are going to be homeless. And so we can, say all we want about why people are homeless and the morality of making choices, right? Like people love to talk about making choices, but at the end of the day, we have a economic situation, a context that demands that we have homeless people. We cannot function economically without homeless people, without unemployed people, without poor people, without starving people. We need those people in order to bring down the cost of everything else or to facilitate prices rising in other places.
Man, I hope people who don't like what you're saying go back and rewind that and just hear about the exponential growth part, because that's the part that like really just confounds me, is that like it doesn't matter if you have a heart or don't have a heart. Like, if you don't admit that labor is the biggest cost that all businesses face, all businesses need to report exponential growth. This model is busted. And that's why I like when people say late stage capitalism, because I don't like to get antagonistic about the word capitalism. I don't really care. It doesn't like
Yeah.
this does raise. I can't move on to the metaphysical part until I ask one more question, just because
Yes.
I'm not doing my due diligence, and it's unfair to you because you've brought up so many good points, and I know that people are going to be dying to like fake attack you from afar by like just like, well, what about this? So you did bring up unions, and I think that would be the last question I want to ask about,
Mm-hmm.
which is like, uh I have several stories about unions from friends, and some of them support unions and some of them don't support them, and they all tug at my heart, all of them. Like I had a friend
Mm-hmm.
who was a teacher, and he was an excellent teacher, and his own union, after he paid dues to them, fired him because he was hired more recently than other teachers, and that was like heartbreaking to
Mm-hmm.
me. He was young, he was fresh out of college, he was idealistic, he had no money, and the part that irritated me was just that he was forced to join the union, and then the union is why he lost his job. That's the only part of the story that bothered me. So you don't need to get into those specifics. Those are just, my anecdotes. But I am curious, like, are unions the solutions? Should there be caps on unions? Like, are unions just basically mobs? Is it just two powerful forces? Like, what do you feel about that kind of subject?
I think unions, as with any large scale institution, function better the more democratic they are, right? When you have a union that's more calcified with like certain people who are like implanted in leadership and never get moved, who can play favorites, who can, do all that kind of stuff. The union is not going to be, it's not going to fulfill the purpose that unions are supposed to serve in a leftist Marxist idea of like how we equal out the playing field. Because the whole point of a union, right, is like the owners of capital, the bosses have all the leverage, right? They have all the money, they have the resources, they have the means of production. The only thing that you have is your individual labor, which is not much. But if you band together and you have a mass of labor that can bargain effectively, then that's the equalizing force. But it depends on the leadership of the union, and it depends on how democratically that leadership is elected. I think sports is a really good
Yeah.
is a really good way to like look at like how a union can be a good union, like in baseball, and how a union can be very, very bad, like in my favorite sport, basketball. So yeah, I mean, there was actually Pablo Torre finds it out. This
Yeah,
really
yeah,
good YouTube show. Yeah, he
yeah.
did an episode on the NFL union where the people in charge of the union who are former players are basically like selling out their union because they're getting promises from the owners that, oh yeah, one day you'll be a business owner and you'll make all this money. So like let's cool it on raising salaries, and like let's help us collude a little bit to like lower the price tag of some of these NFL stars. And like, so yeah, it's like anything, like any large institution, it's a mixed bag. And I think the idea is that the more democratic, the more that the least important person involved in it has the power to affect it on the grand scale, the better it will function.
That was awesome. Thank you. I'm so glad that you brought up sports because normally I'm a big sports fan, and it's embarrassing because people don't associate sports fans with like people who care about metaphysics and care about like politics and like the economy. And
Right,
so
right, right.
so I never guess if one of my guests is going to be into sports, but I was when I was asked the union question, I was specifically thinking about those three, and then the fact that you dropped Pablo Torre just like blew my mind because talk about a rabble rouser who is definitely
Oh my
like,
God. Yeah.
I mean, man, it's incredible how often he is now being talked about, and I'm very proud of him. Like his career has blossomed because he's doing exactly what he should be doing, which is
Yeah.
deep investigative
It's
journalism.
it's shocking to see journalism sometimes. It's like, whoa, oh wait, oh, that's what journalism looks like? Oh,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what okay.
Yeah, no, he's
Yeah.
inspiring. Even if I don't
Yeah.
agree with like, I like him a lot, so I'm not gonna even say that disclaimer. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's very inspirational that the one thing we have left, and it's why I'm actually really upset that X has become what it has, is like that to me was like the most fair playground
Hmm.
for like real journalism to find a stake. I don't believe in Meta at all. I think that they're as corrupt as it comes. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I mean, I guess LinkedIn is a social media, but that's not,
Yeah.
Okay, great job. Wonderful. That's it. If you're listening and you wanted to jump to the part where we talk about life and death and how it's affected Akil's life, you have arrived. I'm going to tie it into one of my favorite things you said in the whole interview was when you referred to social investment. This
Mm.
idea that like, because that really is where my heart is. That's like the only thing I just beat regularly in any conversation is like, these are people, these are humans. You want people around you to be happy, fed, and not angry. It doesn't matter why they're angry. like you don't even need to get into that. You
Mm-mm.
just, your
Hmm.
heart should want to help people. Like when you see an old woman and she's having trouble walking, you should want to grab her arm and help her walk. That's like a normal urge. You should not suppress that. So obviously you have a heart, obviously you care, you have two young children, but I can just tell you're a caring person. Where does that come from? Were you raised religiously? Did you how did you develop your morality and your ethics?
I wasn't raised religiously. My parents were they had like a spiritual bent growing up. But we didn't go to church. They kind of allowed me to like experiment on my own with religion. Yeah, at some point I was like looking into Islam and um but yeah, so on my dad's side, there's a very strong tie to the church. his father and grandfather were very active in the church. I think his grandfather like started one of the big churches in Philly at one point. Um, but he himself kind of always like drifted away from that. And it's something I guess I got from him, is that like there were so many contradictions within the religious doctrine that he just couldn't uh, you know he couldn't process those contradictions and still come on the other side like a true believer. So he opted more like, there's some sort of spiritual balance in the world, and it's our job to like, play a part, or keep some internal balance ourselves to be at peace with the world that we live in. So I think that's always been like a big uh, thing with me. Balance in
Mm.
general, I think, has been always been a thing that like my parents have like instilled in me. Like the idea that like anything in excess can kill you, right? You got to drink water every day, but you can also drown in the ocean. Like you got to find the right balance of whatever emotion, whatever, vice or whatever thing to like, put yourself in equilibrium, put yourself in peace. Um,
Yeah, definitely. No, that's great. So I just kind of keep the through line going. Like,
yeah.
the essential question we ask every guest, and I'm about to ask it, is what do you think happens when you die? Before I ask that, or as I ask it, if there's anything you want to add from that journey before that, it's fine, or in your answer.
Well, like I'm pretty much, a comfortable agnostic atheist in my personal view. So like, what I think is that, probably nothing happens when we die. What I would like to believe is that, you know, there's spooky action at a distance, some weird quantum mechanic thing where the electrons and electricity buzzing around in our brain somehow can like rejoin the universe and maintain some part of our consciousness, so that when we die we're just kind of like you know the body isn't doing anything, but the collection of atoms and electrons that made up who we were, who that like powered our thoughts and feelings, survives in some way and merges with the universe on some level.
That's cool. And so, are you preoccupied or worried, or to any extent, like a person who thinks about this a lot, or is it just inconsequential to you mostly?
I want like as at times, right? Like I've had times when like the thought of it kind of like is a little paralyzing and a little like scary, but most of the time it just kind of makes me think that like I should maximize my time here. Like I should like we don't get a lot of time. We should probably try to use it to one, like live a fulfilling life for ourselves, right? To just make the most of the gift that we've been given. And then two, to like help other people, like make other people's lives as good as they could possibly be. Cause that's how we got here in the first place, is human beings working together and figuring out how to best survive and support each other. And you know,
Yeah, dude, amen. I mean, that's I really like, yeah, instead of the Pledge of Allegiance, if only we had kids pledge that, like, I am only here because of the people before me.
yeah.
Um, and then actually bringing it back specifically to your kids, regardless of whether you actually saw the live childbirth or not, do you ever just have that moment where you're like, where did this animus come from? Like, how, like,
Oh man, it is weird. Like my daughter's 6 now, and every once in a while she just says something that's like, "What? Where did you come from? Like, how are you a person? Like, you were a blob." Like, I was there for both of my kids' birth, and like, they come out and they're just kind of like little squishy, little
yeah,
wrinkly they can barely do anything, and then like, within. Yeah, 6, 7, 8 months, they're like smiling and like asking for things with their motions. Like my youngest is just like I think just turned 15 months,
uh-huh.
and like he's getting words. He's starting to
Yeah,
say words. And it's like, oh, you're communicating with me now. Like it's not just like and it's like, yeah, I you don't know. It's hard to say like when it happens, but when it happens, you recognize it and you're like, wow, that's really cool that that could just pop out of nowhere, that like, we could make this life, and this life now has its own agency and meaning, and yeah.
Yeah. No, well said. And that's part of where my big heart comes from, is just like this, how can you look at anyone and call them a criminal or a deviant or anything? I mean, obviously people do things that are upsetting. That's not what I'm
Right.
pushing back on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um
My one of my favorite, like one of my big inspirations for like all my my politics and my political writing is Michael Brooks. I don't know if you remember Michael Brooks. He passed away like a while ago. He was like pretty young, and it was like one of these tragic things. But one of the things he always said that has always stuck with me is, be kind to people and be ruthless to systems.
I love it. I
Yeah.
wish I could just end the podcast with that, but I always, I do always give my guests just like one last, I call it giving them the floor. I don't like to end the interview with my thoughts. I like to end them with my guest thoughts. So is there any message you would like to tell my audience? It can be about whatever you want.
Um, I would say, yeah. I mean, like, I think that it, like, I end all of my on one pieces with solidarity forever, and I think that is the thing that we need more than anything, just to realize that, like, we are kind of all in this together, no matter what we think about each other's politics, what we think about each other's lifestyles or life choices. Like, we are all still just human beings trying to figure out, this messy process of living. And like, we really need to, now or never, we need to be, we don't need to, coddle each other and accept terrible, awful views that lead to violence and things. We don't need to accept, people being racist or misogynist, but we have to understand that that's those aspects are a unfortunate but just a real part of what it is to be human. Humans are all the good things and we're all the bad things, and we can't, like, I know people, I have like online relationships with people who are, or who I agree with, who are liberal and even even open to leftist stuff, but they'll talk about, right leaning people like, oh, they're subhuman, they're like, they're not real people, we have to like expunge them from the and it's like, you're not gonna fight fire, you're not gonna fight fire with fire, right? You fight fire with water. That's the old man, I'm drawing a blank. Uh Murdered by the Chicago PD.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Uh
Yes, with you.
yeah.
It's okay.
Yes, right. And then yeah, let's go back and add that name. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Don't worry
yeah,
about it.
but yeah, like, that whole thing, like, we're not gonna win these fights by being worse than the people that we're fighting. We're gonna win them by, you know being honest with ourselves about what it is to be human, and also to like find solidarity whenever we can, like real solidarity, not just like, oh, we're gonna throw trans people under the bus to win centrist votes. No, like, real solidarity. We accept people where they are, and we're trying to like bring them together for a common mission, and that common mission is just to live a decent life. Like, that's all we really want.
Thank you, Akil. You're incredible, and I really appreciate what you said at the end, because I think that is what attracted to me to your writing in the first place. Is that, oh, this guy doesn't want to exterminate some people to make the whole better. Like, he sees the same broad spectrum I do, and you phrased it much better than I would. But accepting people where they are is exactly the first step, and then you offer them your hand, and then you help them up, or they help you up, or vice versa. That's my goal on the show, is just to try to bring as many people together to increase solidarity. So thank you, Akil. Thank you, everyone listening. I ran over by a lot, so I'm rushing through the end here. The best way to support my show is to head to mikeyop.com. That's MIKEYOPP.com. Subscribe for my free weekly Substack, where I will entertain you with either personal stories or anecdotes or made up trivial things. But the goal is always to bring us all together. So in the words of Akil Vicks, let's get some solidarity going on. My name is Mike Oppenheim. This has been Coffin Talk. We will see you soon.